Welcome to another post budget episode of Budget Insights series on EY India Insights. In this episode, we explore the Union Budget announcement on the new tax holiday for data centers and what it means for foreign cloud providers, digital infrastructure players, and India's ambitions in AI and cloud computing. Joining us is Vishal Malhotra, leader for tax and TMT sector for EY India, who shares his perspectives on the policy implications and the industry impact. Hi, Vishal, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
So, Vishal, to begin with, what exactly does the new tax holiday for data centers announced in the union budget mean, and how could it change the landscape for foreign cloud and data infrastructure companies operating in India?
We have over the past few years, or maybe over the last year or thereabouts, we have seen that foreign majors have been committing substantial investment to set up data centers in the country. And these data centers are being proposed in India both to tap the domestic market and also to serve uh, global customers such that such data centers have the scale to meet the economics of such investments. So there has on the ground been a challenge that the way the data centers operate, the foreign entities have a good visibility of what actions are being taken at the data center and how the various data center services, whether it's cloud computing, SaaS, or cloud storage services, are provided through the data centers. This has, given us tax risk in terms of, whether, you know, uh, operation of these data centers and serving of customers by foreign, majors give rise to any tax cost of operating such data centers in India. And we have seen on the ground that some of the larger players have faced, tax litigation in India. There has been litigation around whether the data centers are controlled, operated by the foreign players, whether this constitutes a permanent establishment in India, and if it's a permanent establishment, what's the charges, what is the tax, what is the attribution for such permanent establishment, uh, and if Indian companies are resellers, what's the nature of the payment which the Indian company makes to the foreign player, whether it is fee for technical services or royalties. So there has been a lot of uncertainty around, how the foreign companies would get taxed from the operations of the data centers in India. What the budget proposals attempt to do is that they are extending a complete tax holiday up to 2047 for such foreign companies who use these India data centers to serve their global customers. And what they have essentially said is that the global customers can be served by the data centers in India. But as far as the customers in India are concerned, such customers need to be served by the Indian entities operating such data centers under a reseller model so that the companies make a reasonable margin for providing services to the customers in India, which are taxed in India, and India gets its fair share of taxes on such revenues. And they have proposed a 15% safe harbor that if the Indian company earns a cost plus 15% on the infrastructure cost, then that's a fair compensation to Indian entity, and that's a fair amount which should be brought to tax in India. Where it helps the foreign companies is that now they can, freely serve their global customers from India, and they get a tax certainty that they will not get into any tax litigation. They can increase their investments. They can make India based, not just to serve Indian customers, but global customers. India offers substantial advantages. We have a very strong telecom network. We have undersea cables landing up to Indian coasts, which makes these locations very attractive for global data center activities. So I think it really changes the landscape. It gives certainty, tax certainty, which is very critical for foreign players because these data centers involve huge investment, and anyone committing huge investments into India would really like to be clear that what are the operating costs, and tax is a very significant component of it. And this certainty is, I think, really going to propel India into this data center space and also really promote India as a hub for AI.
Thank you, Vishal. Now, adding to the previous question, how might this long term tax incentive extending up to 2047 help India position itself as a global hub for data centers and digital infrastructure, especially in the era of AI and cloud computing?
So, so I think we have already seen that some of the global majors have committed substantial investments into India. We have Google committing $15 billion. Microsoft has already talked about a $20 billion investment, and they are already a reasonably large player in India. Then we have Amazon with a $8.3 million. And again, I think a large number of private equity players, including Blackstone, etc., have all committed investments of 60 to 70 billion dollar cumulatively in the data center space in India. At times, most of due to these uncertainties, at times, most of these investments do not really yield the true potential of the space. And I think with the tax incentive coming in, and I think it's not actually an incentive, it is more certainty around no tax in India and no litigation around how the data center activities are undertaken and how the customers are served from India. I think that is the crucial part here. I think with that happening, I think these investments are certainly going to come to India. And I think depending on how the AI space takes place, grows in India and also globally, we would see that the current investments, if they are a success, the players are able to achieve adequate capacity utilizations. I think we will see substantially more investments coming to India over the next 20 years.
Thank you, Vishal. Now, what are the practical conditions and implications for companies such as the requirement to serve Indian customers through local entities, and how could this affect the domestic players and the broader tech ecosystem?
So I think, so as I mentioned initially as well, so I think one of the requirements they have really made is that as far as the domestic customers are concerned, those customers are served through Indian entities. And the objective really is that whatever incomes are earned or the margins which are attributable to provision of services to the Indian customers is concerned, a part of it should certainly be taxed in India. So India should also have a good play on the tax side as far as provision of data center services to Indian customers is concerned. So the requirement there is then that all the contracts with the Indian customers need to be routed through the Indian entities, which could be Indian subsidiary or even third-party players. And the foreign company cannot directly earn revenue from the Indian customers. And also, the Indian entities are required to retain a fair share of margin, which will be transfer pricing driven. But the government to ensure that those who do not want to get into any form of litigation, they have also got in safe harbor provisions to say that if the Indian reseller entity, which is operating the India data center infrastructure, earns a 15% margins on the cost, then that will be a fair attribution of profits on serving domestic customers between the foreign and the Indian counterparts. And where this happens, then there is really no litigation even around this aspect. So the requirement is Indian customers need to be served under reseller arrangements by the Indian affiliates or Indian entities which are operating the data centers, and there should be a 15% margin earned by the Indian entity on those services. As long as I think these elements are concerned, I think the foreign companies will be eligible to have a complete tax holiday in India. And as a group as well, they will have a significant tax certainty in operating those data centers, both to service the global customers as well as Indian customers. Uh, I think the other part of the question which you have is that how does it impact the domestic players and broader tech ecosystem? Um, I think that as far as domestic data center players are concerned, I think they would also be gainers because some of the larger players like Microsoft or Google or even Amazon's, they would set up their own data centers. But the AI space is so huge, and there are multiple players with a reasonable size operating globally. I think as far as those players are concerned who do not want to wish to or do not wish to make their own investments to serve data centers, to take advantage of the cost efficiencies offered in India, I think they would really like to be working with the domestic players, and that will give a pretty good space for domestic players also to operate and serve the global companies proposing to serve their global customers through India data centers. I think one thing we'll have to be a little cautious here about is that while these tax holidays have been offered, there are certain conditions which have again come in that the benefits will be available to specified companies and specified data centers. So I think we'll need to really wait what those the clarifications which come on those elements to make sure that the larger ecosystem is also going to be eligible for these exemptions or tax holidays, and it is not just the large players who are able to get covered by these guidelines which will or the framework which will come out, and it's not going to be that only those players are governed by that. So I think that we'll have to wait and watch, but I think the intent of the government clearly appears to be to make India a large scale a data center destination for the world. As far as the broader economy is concerned, whenever these data centers are set up, the foreign players are largely interested in investing in the equipment and the technology. They are not necessarily interested in investing in land, building, and other paraphernalia around it. So I think that itself gives a huge opportunity to domestic players to set up the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure which is critical for operation of these data centers. So I think that will be a large opportunity for Indian real estate companies and other large players who have the financial muscle to invest in such infrastructure to facilitate entry of large data centers into the country.
Thank you, Vishal. Now that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us again and sharing the insights on the data center tax holiday and its implications on the technology ecosystem to all our listeners.